I've reviewed a lot of monitors over the past few years, so yeah, here are the best. Of course, I will mostly talk about the ones that I've actually reviewed myself, because I really don't want to base my recommendations on hearsay. But for the sake of giving you a more extensive overview, I will also mention some monitors that I haven't tested myself, but that have been extensively reviewed by trusted resources. So I'm pretty confident talking about these monitors as well. Now, let's start with 1440p. And let me say it right away. You don't need to spend much to get a good 1440p monitor anymore. Somewhere in the ballpark of $300 US gets you some really good 144Hz plus 1440p monitors, like this MSI G27 3QF, which is my #1 recommendation. It has a 165Hz IPS panel, which is a slight variation of those that can be found in MSI's much more expensive monitors. We're getting essentially the same response times performance here, meaning even though it's a pretty affordable monitor, it's one of the fastest 165Hz IPS that money can buy. So where's the catch? Well, it's a pretty basic monitor with a tilt-only stand. No RGB, reflex latency analyzer, light sensor and whatnot. It's really not the most feature-rich monitor that you can get, but I wouldn't consider that a big drawback. Also, some of the more expensive monitors come with quantum dot backlights or nano coatings, essentially meaning that they can render colors with a higher color saturation. The G27 3QF doesn't have a fancy backlight or coating, but it's still able to exceed the sRGB color space by about 30%. That's about 10 percentage points less than higher-end monitors, but still enough that many of the stuff you'll be looking at on this monitor looks oversaturated. So that would be more than enough colors for most users. Though something to consider is that you might end up getting a unit with a mediocre contrast ratio. The unit that I tested had a contrast ratio below 900:1, but I've since seen trusted resources testing samples in the 1200:1 range. So I'm fairly confident that my particular monitor was just one of the weaker ones out there. If you can't live with the tilt-only stand, there's also the QPF version of this monitor that comes with a fully adjustable stand. Another alternative is the HP X27Q, which also comes with an adjustable stand. And most of the things I have said about the MSI is true for this monitor as well. It's a very fast and capable gaming monitor that doesn't have loads of fancy features, but can be had at a very affordable price. Though I recently was made aware that some customers got their X27Qs with a different panel from BOE instead of the LG display panel that the unit that I tested shipped with. It seems like this variant is also performing pretty well, but there's not much reliable information yet. So this is something you definitely need to be aware of, and for me that's a good reason to get the G27 3QF over the X27Q. Now, a notable mention goes to the Lenovo G27Q-20. It's not quite as good as the MSI or HP, but it's super affordable. Depending on your region, you can get this for the equivalent of roughly $220 US, if you're lucky, which is insane for a 1440p 165Hz IPS monitor. Of course, I've got this and all the other monitors linked down below in case you want to check them out. If you have the budget to get the MSI G27 3QF instead, it is worth the upgrade. But if you're on a very tight budget, the Lenovo G27 Q-20 is a great alternative. If you for some reason want to spend more money, you might take a look at the MSI Mag27 QRF-QD. I personally haven't tested it, but judging from the reviews by Hardware Unboxed and Artings, it's one of the best monitors of this class. But before you get overly excited, it's not a massive improvement over the MSI G27 3QF or QPF. Main upgrades are the increased color saturation thanks to the QD backlight and a better backlight strobing mode. At that price point, you should really start considering making the jump to the 240Hz class. Yes, 240Hz 1440p monitors are even a good bit more expensive, but this will be a noticeable upgrade over the 144Hz class for gaming. My #1 choice here is the Alienware AW2721D. This has an excellent 240Hz IPS panel with great colors, and it even comes with a pretty respectable factory calibration. It also gets insanely bright if you wanted to, and it's one of the very few monitors that have a light sensor that actually works. And of course, it has very fast response times. The combination of that 1440p IPS panel with a 240Hz refresh rate plus fast response times really make this an extremely versatile monitor. Doesn't matter if you're playing first-person shooters or editing some photos, a monitor like this really can handle anything. If you don't like the aesthetics of the Alienware, there's also the ASUS PG-279QM. I personally haven't tested it, but judging from other reviews, its performance is very similar to that of the Alienware. So I wouldn't hesitate to get the ASUS over the Alienware if you prefer a black monitor or can get it at a cheaper price. Now there's also the Samsung Odyssey G7, which is one of the very few VA panel monitors that actually have decent response times, meaning it's one of the very few monitors that are really good for heavy gaming and for watching movies. So it's no surprise that the G7 is a very popular choice. However, there's a catch. Well, actually there's two. There's the super steep 1000R curve that really isn't for everyone. And secondly, you can find countless reports online on various quality control related issues. Many people report they had to RMA multiple times to get one that's actually working fine. So given how bad the quality control seems to be, I really hesitate recommending the G7. I'll have it linked down below anyway in case you want to take a shot, but I'd highly recommend making sure that you get a good return policy. Unfortunately, there are not that many alternatives when you want that high contrast for movies and such and still want a very fast gaming monitor. There's the AOC PD27, which is very similar to the G7, but it's not available in every region. And there's the brand new Alienware AW3423DW, aka that new Quantum.OLED. I've yet to review this, but it's safe to say that the OLED panel gives you the best of both worlds when it comes to contrast and response times, though the QD-OLED tech isn't without its compromises. As other reviewers have pointed out, the monitor doesn't do well in bright rooms, and the unusual pixel structure might bother you when looking at text. Being a relatively new panel tech, we also don't really know yet whether burn-in might be an issue. On the plus side though, the response times are about as fast as a monitor can get, and contrast is basically infinite in the right viewing conditions. Of course, this doesn't come cheap, but to be honest, I actually expected this monitor to be quite a bit more expensive when I first heard about it. Now, let's shift gears a little and talk about 1080p. Even in 2022, 1080p monitors are still very much alive and a great choice if you're on a budget or just looking for a smaller monitor. And 1080p still is the resolution of choice if you're a competitive gamer or sweaty tryhard and want to maximize your FPS. I previously highly recommended the Mobius EX2510 for both gaming and more creative stuff because it's an excellent and versatile monitor. Since then though, it got a successor, namely the EX2510S, making the original version super hard to get your hands on in most regions. If you can get the original EX2510 at a decent price, I still highly recommend it. The new S version though isn't really as good as the original anymore and too expensive for what it brings to the table. So my new #1 recommendation is the Gigabyte G24F. Its response times are among the fastest that IPS monitors can get these days, colors look vibrant and saturated, and it has good ergonomics. The thing I dislike the most about the G24F is its not so great factory setup. The unit that I tested had a green tint out of the box, which obviously isn't great. Fortunately though, that's pretty easy to fix with a few tweaks. You might want to check out my full review for the settings recommendations. Overall, the G24F is amazing value, considering it's one of the fastest monitors of its class and that usually can be had below the $200 barrier. A great alternative is the ASUS VG249Q. It's a very similar monitor to the G24F in terms of the overall performance and specs. It's really a matter of which one of these two you can get at a cheaper price. You can't go wrong with either one. If you're willing to spend a bit more, or quite a lot more actually, then the Acer XV252QF is an excellent choice. It's that 390Hz IPS monitor you've probably already heard of. This is one of the best monitors for competitive gaming that money can buy, and personally I take it over a good 240Hz TN monitor any day of the week. It's not quite as fast as the best TNs in terms of pure response times performance, but the clarity and smoothness you get with the 390Hz backlight strobing mode totally make up for that. And yeah, I probably don't even have to tell you how much better the IPS panel looks than those ugly, washed out TN panels you find in your typical Zoe monitor, for instance. Contrary to that, the XV252QF has a wide color gamut and actually is pretty color accurate. You could even use this for photo or video editing if you wanted to. A more affordable alternative is the ViewSonic XG2431. It's a 240Hz IPS that was tuned and certified by Blurbusters, which is the certification that actually means something. I couldn't get my hands on this monitor yet, and it looks like it won't come to Europe at all, so I'm not sure if I ever get the chance to review it. But from what I've seen from other reviewers, it's a beast for first-person shooters. Especially if you're someone who uses backlight strobing, then this monitor is something you should definitely take a look at. And if you're on an even tighter budget, the AOC 24G2ZU is an excellent deal. It's usually just a few bucks more expensive than a good 144Hz monitor, but it also comes with a 240Hz IPS panel. The backlight strobing is not as good or refined as with the more expensive monitors that I've mentioned, but it's still decent. Pretty much the same is true about the response time's performance. It's not the best, but pretty good. It's surely not the best 240Hz monitor out there, but it also doesn't need to be. At its price, it's basically rivaling the 144Hz class. And for somewhat competitive gaming, I prefer the 24G2ZU over any of its 144Hz rivals. So yeah, these are my top recommendations. I'll have affiliate links in the video description in case you want to buy something and support this channel. Also, I'm planning to make these roundup style videos a bit more often now, so let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, bis zum nächsten Video.